Well, peace, friends. All right, that's pretty pathetic. Let's try it again. This is something you're going to have to get used to if this works out. Is I say peace and you yell peace, Tom, back at me, okay? All right. Peace, friends. Peace, Tom. That was much better. My name's Tom Arthur. I'm the pastor at Sycamore Creek, and I am so glad that you all are out here with us tonight. You braved the negative 3-degree weather today. You braved the snow. And we're here to have a town hall meeting and to explore what this adoption might look like for Sycamore Creek to adopt Potterville. If you're online, I want to welcome you online. You might be on Zoom or on Facebook. I'm going to be trying to pay attention to Zoom and Facebook. So if you have questions, you can type those in the comments section. We're not going to be able to go over everything tonight. There's no way that we'll get all of the details in. And I'm especially grateful as I'm looking out to see all the Sycamore Creek folks here, whether you're online, on Zoom, Facebook, or whether you're in the room. I want to remind you, if you came from Sycamore Creek, your presence here tonight is primarily as an encouragement to folks at Asbury. This is a kind of informational Q&A for them to hear about this and to kind of get a sense of, what is an adoption like. So this is primarily for them. We're going to have a town hall meeting of our own to kind of focus on what this means for us in the future. But I'm really grateful that you all showed up. It's good to see you out there. I want to take a moment and just make sure that there's some people that you do know who are in the room. Of course, you know me. I'm Tom Arthur. I'm the pastor of Sycamore Creek. I've been pastor here coming up on 13 years at Sycamore Creek. I want, if you're one of our leadership, we call our leadership team the vision team. If you're on the vision team, would you take a moment and just stand up? So these are the folks that have been talking with your leadership team. Chuck Bird here and Eric Neeser. Eric is always the best dressed guy with a bow tie. Kathy Doby's not just walking down the aisle standing up. She is on our vision team. And Pastor Mark from our Potterville campus is here as well. And so these are some people that have been talking about this and praying and discerning. Everyone else in the room from Sycamore Creek, they're getting new information right along with you tonight. So if you want to ask some questions, these are people that are standing who will know. Everybody else from Sycamore Creek will have some sense of what happened with Potterville. So go ahead and sit down, Vision Team. Thank you so much. I want to have Dirk Elliott stand up. Dirk is the conference staff member here tonight, and he is in charge, the director of congregational vibrancy. Did I get that right? Is it vibrancy and leadership development? And he is writing a book on adoptions as we speak. So who knows? This could end up being part of his book, and he's coaching and consulting us through this. It's good to have somebody who's done this. I mean, we've done this once with Potterville, and Dirk has done this lots of times. So he's our kind of resident expert in the room, and I meet with him regularly for coaching. If you're from Sycamore Creek, whether you're on the vision team or otherwise, would you take a minute and just stand up so we can see who you all are? We've got a good crew from Sycamore Creek here tonight. So thank you so much for being out here. We really appreciate it. And then if you are from Asbury United Methodist Church, would you stand up so we can see who the Asbury folks are? And then everyone except for the Asbury leadership team sit down so we can see who the Asbury leadership team is. If you're at Sycamore Creek, then you can look around and see these are the folks that we've been talking with. Pastor John is here, who's the pastor at Asbury, and then we have Dawn and Debbie and Judy, and Carol is right over there. So I think I got everybody. Did I get everybody, Debbie, that's in the room? So thank you so much, Asbury, for being here tonight. Here's what we're going to do tonight. You should have gotten an agenda when you walked in, and everything on this is an estimate. But if something that ends up going longer, just know that the longer something goes, either something else is going to have to be shorter, or we'll be here longer than 8 o'clock tonight. We're gonna start with a video here in just a moment about adoptions and restarts, and I think it's a video that's a very hopeful video, and then we'll take some time to talk about it. And then we'd like to take some time to introduce ourselves to you as Sycamore Creek. Who are we, and what's our ministry about, and what unique particular mission has God given us as a church here? What's our part that we see as part of Jesus' mission in the world? And then we're going to talk about the adoption plan and give you kind of an overview of what we imagine that looking like right now. And then we have a little video about our adoption with Potterville that we want to show you. And then I'm going to interview two people from our Potterville campus who are on our leadership team, Pastor Mark and Kathy Doby, about what changed there and what changes they had to make. And then we'll end with an open Q&A time. So we may not answer every single question tonight, but we're hopefully going to give you enough information that you know what questions you want to ask if we don't get to them tonight. And I'm sure we're going to have more conversations. We'll talk a little bit at the end about what next steps we're taking. And we always like to take time to evaluate how a meeting went at the end, because you're going to go home maybe, and you'll talk to your spouse or your friend about how this meeting went. And if we don't talk a little bit about that in the end of the meeting, then we don't get a chance to improve next time we do this. And we'll wrap it up with prayer. So that's where we're going tonight. I'm going to start with a prayer, and then I'm going to invite Pastor Mark, up to introduce this video and kick us off with that. So would you join me in prayer? Direct us, O Lord, in all our doings, all these adoption doings, all these meetings, all these questions, all of this information. Direct us, O Lord, in all our doings with your most gracious favor, and further us with your continual help. Take this process and this mission and your work of the Holy Spirit at Sycamore Creek and at Asbury and further it through our meeting tonight. That all our works begun, Sycamore Creek began 20 years ago, Asbury began many more years ago, continued, and sometimes ended, that all our works begun, continued, and ended in you, that we may glorify your holy name, and finally, by your mercy, obtain everlasting life. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. And all who agreed said, Amen. Amen. Mark, if you want to take a moment to introduce what we're going to watch.
Well, welcome everyone. As Todd said, my name is Mark. I'm the pastor at Sycamore Creek in Potterville. And I'm the experienced one who has gone through an adoption. And so I bring that to all of us tonight. And I know when you approach adoption, a lot of like what you're thinking is, what on earth is this? Like, what does it involve? What is it like? It's hard to get your head wrapped around. In the midst of that too, there's lots of emotions that are involved with particularly the adopted church and all the changes that are coming. It's just, what is all of this? And there's a church in Chicago called New Life Church, and they have been doing tons of adoptions in the Chicago area as a way of revitalizing churches and reaching new people with the good news of Jesus. And in the midst of doing these adoptions, they created a video, and we want to show you that video because we think it's really helpful to begin to get our imaginations going for what is an adoption like. I love the name of that church, New Life, by the way, because that's really what an adoption is about. It's about new life that we are able to find through Christ, a new way of doing things. So we're going to ask you to watch this video, and then as you watch it, you'll see that there's going to be some discussion time afterward. So pay attention to the video, and what do you notice about that video as we watch it? Let's watch that video together. Randy, go ahead and roll it.
The mission field has come to the cities of America. And unless we do something about the city, we are neglecting a vast mission field. Can we do a church in the city that is urban resistant, that thrives in the city, that revitalizes old congregations, that restores buildings, do church in the city a different way? There's an enormous amount of churches in the city that have pretty much the same story. Churches that in the 40s and 50s were vibrant, thriving congregations found themselves in larger auditoriums with real small congregations and an inability to know how to turn things around and reach the neighborhood around them. And that's exactly where New Life comes into the picture. I came to the city at the age of 17 thinking I'm not here to stay just to go to school, and found myself on the southwest side of Chicago in a little church that needed to be rebirthed. Having agreed to help them out, I saw for the first time the plight of urban churches. And that little church that some people had already given up on, a team of people started coming together, and God has grown what is now New Life Community Church, and we saw what we would come later on to view as our first restart. The church grew. We started to multiply throughout the city of Chicago. Then one day, out of the blue, I got a phone call. On the other line, a fella said, "Hi, my name is Chuck."
I came here in 1946 as a teenager. I was married here and my children were born here. The church became my life, the life of our family.
He told me about how great that church had been at one time and how many people were in the Sunday school classes and how many people they were reaching for Christ and how many missionaries they had sent out. And then he lowered his voice and he looked down and he said, "But Mark, we've hit on hard times."
We had the funds, but we were not able to discern the times.
They had wrestled to try to reach the community, but were really struggling and just felt like, we don't know how to do this. We want to, we desire to, but we can't.
We prayed as a board and felt led to call and talk to a man by the name of Mark Job. Not knowing much about him, knowing he was young and we were old, the board, after interviews and meeting with him, felt led to talk to the congregation about merging.
And I was about as nervous as Chuck was.
We were fearful, not knowing what would a merge bring, that they would sell our building, take the money and go elsewhere, or whether we lose our name, identity, our history.
We don't erase the history of a church that we work with. I consider the history of Galilee my history.
We wanted to see what God had begun 105 years ago to be continued, and we had a unanimous vote.
And we've been at it for a few years now, and that place now has 3 services. Close to 500 people attend on Sunday morning. The Sunday school is booming with people. There are people coming to Christ on a regular basis.
The scary thing was natural, but none of that happened. They didn't sell the building. They enhanced it much over. They reached out into the neighborhood. The change of name was not a problem.
We don't come in as a church that's 7 years old in this location. We come in a church that's 107 years old, that owns all the history of Galilee, all the witness, all the testimony. That's ours together. We share that.
My name is Chuck McWhirter, and this is my church.
I'm Elisa Munoz, and this is my church.
It kind of struck us, maybe instead of planting new churches, what about if we help relaunch, restart, revive existing congregations? The more we started dialoguing and working through this, the more we realized this could be a win-win situation.
Been attending this church for 57 years.
I attended here as a little girl with my mom.
My family's had a business in Miles Park about 40 years. I was saved a year after the church was built.
All my life has been spent in this church.
2.5 years ago is when I first started here in New Life.
I think the first part of the vision of a restart is coming in understanding that this is not really a new work. This is building upon something that has been in the community for years, typically a church that's been built on the prayers and faith of seniors that have been there for many, many, many years.
I can remember as a little girl, my mother saving and skimping so she can give toward the building program in this church.
Our first agenda was to build relationship with people. We wanted to get to know Some of the older folks that have been here had built the church with their bare hands, many of them.
I have poured all the concrete foundation and the floors in the basements.
We wanted to honor their history and not shut down the church, but let them know that we're building on something that's strong and that we honor what they've done in the past.
You get set in your ways to a certain extent. You attend the same church for 50 years.
As we progressed, the adjustments had to come. There was changes that needed to be made. There was a lot of demand upon people because we had a lot of new people coming to know the Lord.
I was a retired fire department chaplain, which I currently am. And I felt a need to step up my service to New Life Church and to our community.
Most of the people who were here at the church prior to New Life coming in have stayed and have been able to navigate through the changes. And they find themselves now, if you were to ask them, that they are busy and more involved in ministry than they ever have been.
They unanimously decided that they would like to ordain me.
When we became New Life, just seemed like there was just a spark in the air.
We livened up our service with our worship music.
We were careful to make sure that we still blended in some of the traditional songs.
We started reaching the neighborhood with a service that the community was in tune to.
We were able to have a tasteful fit.
Today we have 3 services of 300 people instead of 1 service of 70 people.
It was very good because we got a young group started, and then they're the future church.
Sometimes my wife will elbow me and say, wow, we're loud. And I say to my wife, look around here, we're packed. Before, we were thinking about our numbers dwindling. And now we're thinking about we need a new building. My name is Joe Kovarik. This is my church.
I'm John DeLong, and this is my church.
I am Tom Biskin.
My name is David Yee.
Paula Kovarik.
I'm Laura DeLong.
And this is my church.
My name is Agnes Wilson. This is my church.
My name is Marty Ozinga, and this is my church.
God has been at work in that neighborhood long before we came on the scene. God has been working sometimes 100 years before we ever got there. And it's our heart to say, can we cooperate with what God is already doing?
What we needed was people. How do you get people if you haven't got a preacher?
I came as an associate pastor with no salary and 0 benefits.
We can close the church, sell all our assets, and give to missions. The only problem with that idea is what you're really doing is you're abandoning the mission field that God has given you right in your own community.
Our goal is to come in, see their history, see the history of the church that's been there, the light that's been shining in that location, and keep that going.
If Chicago is going to be reached, it's got to happen through every life-giving church.
We are trying to be what the church is called to be, a place where people are encountering God, they're trusting Jesus Christ as their Savior, and they're learning to follow His Word.
We have young people. We have babies being born into the church.
The people that had been here for a long time, it was clear that they were excited about change and new young people that were coming in and kids and older people. We just like to see the mix of a lot of people coming together.
Everybody who has gifts and abilities was invited to use their gifts and abilities in serving. And the majority of the people that stayed are somehow involved in ministry.
This may not be right for everyone. We go into every situation very open-handed.
New Life is just offering a spot on a God-sized vision. That you can be part of this vision, that God is doing something great in Chicago.
God has a purpose for every church. To be able to come in as a restart, you're breathing new life into that particular location.
You say new life, yes, new life. Our church is living, and we thank God for that.
And so we celebrate the history, we celebrate the past.
It wasn't about us anymore, but it was about people coming in and coming to know Christ.
We enjoy the present, even though it might be a little bumpy at first.
We decided 6 years ago that we would do whatever it takes to reach the community.
And we're going to look forward to the future.
So our heart is to see places like Chicago transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ from the inside out. Seeing churches that have existed in a neighborhood for years that have a great history making an impact once again in a vital way in this community.
Well, you had an opportunity to watch that. I would encourage you to now in pairs find someone new. It can be threes or fours, I don't care. But talk about what jumped out at you as you were watching that video. What did you notice from it? And then I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do that, and then I'll have you report back. If you're online, feel free to use the chat function online to, again, what jumped out at you as you were watching that. Okay, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to talk about that. I'm going to have you wrap up your conversations. There will be more opportunity to talk amongst yourselves. So I'm going to continue to talk so you can pay attention to what I have to say. This is an opportunity here for you to sort of report back. What were some of the things that you noticed or what jumped out at you? And I'm going to do my best to be able to hear you. And then I'll repeat it into the microphone so that everyone can hear what you have to say.
There's
And
about
the
20 people online between Facebook, YouTube, and Zoom. So
yes. So we're also paying attention to the comments
Yep.
there. But what things jumped out at you as you watched that video? Yeah, Kathy.
We were just talking back here about how they were talking about dwindling numbers and how difficult it is to get people to come, even though there's people all around in the neighborhood around. And it was the same situation in Potterville. There's people out there. How do you get them in?
Right.
So Kathy was saying that she noticed the people in the video talking about dwindling numbers and how there's plenty of people out in the neighborhood, out in the community, but the difficulty of the church reaching those people and that struggle of numbers within the church going down. Yeah. Dawn says she talked about that
Not knowing
too.
how to reach the people that are right around us.
Yeah, there's this disconnect almost of, we're here and we want to reach you, but not knowing how to do that. Yes. What else jumped out at you as you were watching that? Yeah, Carol.
What I noticed was that it incorporated people's history, people that had been involved in that church for a long time, that were brought along.
Yes. That is encouraging, isn't it? And Carol noticed the history that they presented, and that the history was still a part of the church moving forward after the adoption with the new life. And there was really a celebration, I think, of what the church had been in the past and a building on that moving forward. Thank you, Carol. Yeah, Vince.
The diversity, both in the ethnic and the age group.
Yes. Vince noticed the diversity, that there was a lot of different skin colors represented in these new churches and a lot of different age groups all together. I love that idea of a multi-ethnic, multi-generational church, and you definitely saw it in those restarts. What else jumped out at you? The buildings? What about them, Vince? Yeah, they weren't new buildings, were they? They took older buildings and gave them new life. Yes, absolutely. I think I saw a comment in the back. Yeah.
Well, that they included old hymns as well as some new songs.
Yes, that they honored the history of the church by having some new music along with some hymns. Yes, I noticed that too. Shelly, yeah. All right, I can't see you, Shelly, behind the light.
Oh, sorry. It's okay. Coming from Sycamore Creek, original Sycamore Creek, I've never been in the place where Potterville has been and where Asbury would be. But the thing that I saw were the benefits of bringing more people of deep faith together. And the one thing that I've really been able to benefit from and kind of help my faith walk is Potterville does different missions. They do different ministry. And so where Sycamore Creek at South Penn, we probably won't ever do some of those things. But I get to kind of live out my faith the way God's wired me by us having Potterville be part of our family. So very beneficial.
Very good. Thank you, Shelly. So Shelly shared that she's been a part of Sycamore Creek for a very long time, even well before we adopted Potterville. And she appreciates the spiritual maturity that comes as part of an adoption. And then also along with it, particular to Potterville, and she sort of saw this reflected in the videos, that other campuses have different strengths than particularly the Lansing campus of, sort of the first campus of Sycamore Creek has, and that there's a wonderful thing that different places, different campuses can have different ministry and different missions that they partake in. Yeah, Tom.
One of the things I jumped on was the idea of serving the community. That can take a whole wide range of activities, but an important thing, I think.
Yeah, so Tom says he noticed in the video how each of those churches served their communities in ways that were unique to that community and to that church. Yeah, it was a beautiful thing, Tom.
Let me share with you some things that people have written online. Mark Raymond said, "What jumped out at me, the sense of ownership everyone took in the new endeavor." Jeremy Cracky, who is married in this building, by the way, before Sycamore Creek had a building. Jeremy said, "I noticed that this adoption was deeply emotional to those who had been a part of the church for all of those years, like tears. It brings me joy to know they understand a change was needed and backed it up with their trust and faith in God. 70, now 300 in attendance. Wow." Mary Ellen says, "I found it very exciting and encouraging. We've had a great experience joining Lansing to Potterville. I anticipate good things from partnering with Asbury." Bonnie says, "I was thinking about the pride and ownership as well. It is very emotional when you're thinking of closing the doors, then boom, and it's back open."
Yeah, lots of good stuff. Any other things that you noticed from that video? Yeah, way in the back.
I think the one congregational member that said, she realized it wasn't about her anymore, and it was about realizing what's best for continuing the church, that mission. But I found that great.
Yes, so noticing that it's not just about me in that video, and that woman talking about how it's not just about me anymore, it's about something much bigger and about reaching new people and the new life that we have through Jesus. Very good. Yeah, Sarah.
Cindy and I also talked about how if it's a really young church, then you lose the benefit of the older generations that have been walking with Jesus for a long time. And I loved that these families were coming in with their young kids, and they would be learning from and having the stories and the faith journeys of these people that have been on that faith walk for a long time.
Yeah, so Sarah talked about how if you're a younger church with lots of young people, if you miss out if you don't have an older generation that's part of that church, and that through these adoptions that we saw in the video, you get to see that impact that an older generation can have on a younger generation, and what a strength that is for churches.
I just mentioned that was my wife who was just talking. And those are my two boys, Micah and Sam, who are at the back table there. Sam is in 3rd grade, and Micah is in 5th grade. 4th grade. Wait, 3rd grade and 5th grade. 3rd grade and 5th grade. Did I get that right?
Do you want to tell us their ages too, or can we guess?
8 and 11.
Oh, you noticed that right away. Yeah. Very good.
Hey, Stan Hecker said, "They made it work!" ! So, I think we're gonna go on to the next video, but
sounds good.
So we want to introduce ourselves to you a little bit. I've actually been to New Life and done a residency there for a period of time, kind of going and visiting lots of their campuses and meeting Mark Jobe, the pastor there. It's really inspiring. It's like watching the birth of a denomination. I think they have 30, 40, 50 campuses at this point across the Chicagoland area. And one of the guys in that video, John Palomari, has done 5 or 6 different adoptions. He's like their adoption specialist. He works adopting a church, gets it stable, and then moves on to another adoption, and they bring another pastor in. It's really, in a lot of ways, really very inspiring to see what they're up to. But we want to introduce you to Sycamore Creek, and we're going to do this by showing you a brief segment of a message that Mark and I delivered as a conversation sermon. We do a lot of conversation sermons at Sycamore Creek, and this one is, it's distinctive of Sycamore Creek, is one, we do a lot of conversation sermons. Second, we're not in our building. We do a lot of getting out of the building. And we are in the pavilion at Potter Park Zoo. I can't remember what the day was. The Tiger Den is the pavilion. It was this past summer. And we are in a series called Squad Goals, where we're looking at our mission, our vision, our values, and our measures as a church, our vision frame. And so this is a brief introduction to our vision frame and to a little bit of our mission. And the end of this segment, right now our preaching also includes conversation. So we preach a segment, and then there's a chance to talk about it. So you're going to get a little feel for that tonight, because we're going to watch Mark and I preaching, teaching, talking, conversing, and then ends with a question that you're going to have a little bit of time to talk about that question. Okay? So here we go. Mark, what are some of the squads you've been in your life?
I was just part of a squad this morning. I don't know if you noticed, but we transformed this pavilion into a church, and that took a squad of people working together to transform it.
There was a whole team putting together. I think about when I was coaching my kids' baseball team. That was a squad. Took coaches, it took players, everybody working together.
Yeah, I think too this past summer, Potterville had a Gizzard Fest, and I was part of the Gizzard Fest committee, and there's a squad who helped organize this committee.
The Gizzard Fest squad, yeah. We all know squad. I don't know, this isn't quite as awesome as the Gizzard Fest, but my first real paying job was at Fazoli's. Like, there was a squad of team members, that made that thing happen. Fast food Italian.
Yes. Very good. So we're talking today about our missional mandate as a church. This is, at its essence, why do we exist as a church? And this is maybe the most important message of this whole series, because we're sort of setting the foundation for everything else that we will talk about throughout the rest of the series. And at Sycamore Creek, we say that we exist to ignite authentic life in Christ and to fan it into an all-consuming flame. That's our mission. That's our why. That's why we exist as a church.
This is what we refer to as our vision frame. It's the thing that frames everything we do. And on one side is this mission. But then on the other side, which we're going to talk about next week, are our missional values. It's the manner in which we go about doing things. We're curious, we're creative, we're compassionate.
And the following week, we're going to talk about our missional strategy. Like, how do we accomplish our mission? And we do that through connecting, growing, and serving in small groups and in worship.
And then lastly, we're going to talk about what's our measure. How do we know what kind of Christian are we trying to develop as Sycamore Creek? And for us, it's 3 simple rules. A Christian who does no harm, does good, and stays in love with God. And this moment, Mark, at this time, I think it's so helpful for us to remember why we exist as a church. What's our why? Why are we here? Know why you are here. So let's talk about the mission.
That's what we're going to
today.
do. We're going to take a deep dive today into the mission of our church, which is, again, we exist to ignite authentic life in Christ and fan it into an all-consuming flame. Will you say that with me? We exist to ignite authentic life in Christ and fan it into an all-consuming flame. Now, the thing that we are centered around as a community is Christ.
That's at the center of that.
It is. It's at the center of that whole thing. That, life in Christ, that's absolutely essential. We believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he became a human being, he took on flesh and became one of us, so that all humans, all of us, might become sons and daughters of God, so that we be part of God's family. And Jesus is the central part of that. Now we think that sort of a relationship with Jesus, it starts with a spark. It starts with igniting. And if you think of just a little bit of a little tiny spark, when you first get a spark and you're trying to light a fire, you do everything you can to protect that spark and to nourish that spark and to help that spark.
Come on, baby, light my fire.
Exactly.
Different kind of fire we're trying to light right now, but same
at the
process.
core of Jesus and who Jesus is and the spark that we're trying to protect is good news. That the news of Jesus, that what we know about Jesus is good news for everyone. And we call that evangelism. Now, we base that good news off of the command that Jesus gave us as followers of Jesus to go and to share that good news. So Jesus said to his followers, he said, "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And so what we do as a community is we go and we offer Jesus to each other and to our world. We remind each other that through Jesus, we can be forgiven. We remind each other that through Jesus, we have freedom from all the things that we might be in bondage to. We remind each other that those broken places in our lives, that through Jesus, those places can be healed. We need to hear that from each other. That it's the good news. It's the igniting that we do as a community.
So what are we trying to ignite? Authentic life in Christ. Now that word authentic is really important for us here at Sycamore Creek, but before we tell you what we think that means, we'd love to hear what you think it means. So turn to somebody at your table there and answer this question. What does the word authentic mean to you? And why is it important for our mission as a church or not?
Or not.
Let's talk about that here at tables or in the comments section. All right, so turn to somebody next to you, or if you're in Zoom or Facebook, type in the comments, why is the word authentic important to the mission of the church? All right, the word authentic is really important to us as a church. One of the things I think that people struggle with is churches don't let people be who they are when they come in the building. You have to put on your sort of Sunday best clothes, Sunday best language, Sunday best actions. I can see this as an important conversation for y'all because you're still talking about it. That's good because this is important to us too. So that series, Squad Goals, is kind of like a partnership class, or we call membership partnership because I think today's culture, like membership, is like you're a member of Groesbeck Golf Club, right over here, golf course, right? And you pay your dues and you go use their stuff. That's what membership means. Or you're a member of Planet Fitness, and you pay your dues and you go use their stuff. But we're not looking for people to pay their dues and use our stuff. We talk about partners. We're looking for people who are going to partner with us in our mission. Do you remember what our mission is? To ignite authentic life in Christ and fan it into an all-consuming flame. Do you know that? Like that's all very Wesleyan. Like it's a sort of new way of talking Wesleyan. It's that experience of assurance that Christ died for me, for my sins, not just for the world, but for me. That's the igniting that authentic life, and then the fan it into an all-consuming flame is the work of God's grace and sanctification, going on to perfection from one degree of glory to the next. Now, we just gave it different language, right? Ignite authentic life in Christ and fan it into an all-consuming flame. So that series, Squad Goals, would be a great series. If you really want to understand Sycamore Creek, watch that series. And on your agenda, there's a link there that we made, sycamorecreekchurch.org/squad goals, and it will take you to a playlist on YouTube that has all of those messages in it. And you'll get a really great feel for that vision frame. Randy, put that vision frame up on the screen just one more time. What our mission is, ignite authentic life in Christ and fan it into an all-consuming flame. Our values, we're a church that's curious, creative, and compassionate. Those values are the most external facing part of our vision frame because we put them right on our signs. So people are driving by like, oh, what does that mean? I'm curious about a church that's curious. Oh, creative. What does that mean? And we're compassionate to everybody. So, and then our strategy. And actually, I saw John, your pastor, has been part of my network and connected with Sycamore Creek. And when you come in here, it says connect, grow, and serve. So you guys are already familiar with that strategy of connecting with others and with God and growing in the character of Christ and serving the church, community, and world in small groups and in worship. And then the last one's our measure. How do we know that we're accomplishing all of this? Well, more and more people are doing less and less harm. Number one rule, do no harm. More and more people are doing good. This all sounds familiar, right? If you're a Wesleyan, like John Wesley says, do all the good you can in all the places you can to all the people you can whenever you can. And then lastly, staying in love with God. And our vision, that Squad Goals series, just 1 week goes through each one of those corners. So if you're Asbury and you really want to go deep dive on who Sycamore Creek is, sycamorecreekchurch.org/squad goals will get you to that. I'm going to now walk through the nuts and bolts of this adoption. And so if you want to take your agenda, and I think we've got some of this that'll go up on the screen here as well. But we're gonna look at the adoption draft plan, and then on the back side of that is the launch plan for how we would relaunch this as a campus. But I want to highlight at the top, the title of each one of these documents is draft. This is not set in stone. This is how we imagine it. You have a plan, and a plan helps you improvise along the way. I was just meeting with somebody the other day, and they said, Tom, what you're really good at doing, and what Sycamore Creek's really good at doing, is failing fast forward. Like, we fail. That's part of being creative, by the way, is having the freedom to fail, experiment, fail, learn from it, go back and do it again, experiment, fail, learn from it, go back and do it again until you get it done. So I just want to emphasize this is a draft. But right now we're in a period of discernment. You all are getting a little bit of taste of what Sycamore Creek is. We're getting a little taste of you. We're kind of dating each other, right? We're seeing if we want to go out on a second date, a third date, eventually get engaged, and then move in together after the wedding. We've hired a consultant or coach, Dirk. He came actually with a great price tag. Our ministry shares. That's the benefit of being part of a conference. Is that's his job, is to help us do this. And then what we're kind of in right now is this season of creating a plan of merger about all of the changes, so that you're really familiar with what this is going to be. Actually, it says a church-wide vote. I understand that the Book of Discipline actually doesn't do it as a church-wide vote now. They do it as a charge conference. So it's just your leadership that's voting on this. But that's why these town halls are really important. But both Sycamore Creeks has to have a charge conference, and Asbury has to have a charge conference to vote on this. And what you're doing in that adoption is you're handing over to our vision team. That's the people who are standing up at the beginning, the leadership team. You're handing over the leadership of this church and its mission and ministry. And that includes a lot of different things. It includes the decision making and the leadership. So there's a sense of that. There's something that we've figured out about how to work and do mission and ministry in this world and in this culture, and a trust that we can execute on that and do it well. So handing over that decision making and leadership. Also turning over to our vision team. This is basically like our church council, the assets, liabilities, and fiscal responsibility and management. So there's not two checking accounts, there's one checking account. And we have a set of systems to manage that. The management of this building and the facilities, and our ministry systems and strategies. One of the things that Sycamore Creek's known for, and that I've coached many churches on, are systems. And so we have a small group system, we have a stewardship system, we have a worship planning system, and these all help us. A system saves you stress, time, energy, and money. And so we will build those systems into here. The name of this church would become Sycamore Creek. And Asbury's not going to be the name of it anymore. It'll probably be called the Eastwood Campus, would be my guess. Sycamore Creek's Eastwood Campus. That's a draft. There'll be a ceasing of public worship at Asbury for a period of time, and Asbury folks will attend one of Sycamore Creek's campuses. while a launch team is developed to relaunch this as a campus. We're going to, again, that's the big thing we're going to go over at the back. But the folks at Asbury will need to learn how to function as Sycamore Creek. Being absorbed into Sycamore Creek for a period of time is the best option to do that. There's something working at Sycamore Creek that Asbury folks will need to learn, or at least catch a glimpse of. That's not to say that we're perfect or that we have everything figured out. We fail a lot, but we fail fast forward. We experiment and we get back up and do it again. There needs to be a clear and distinct end to Asbury, and I think that's an essential part of finding a new identity as Sycamore Creek. Otherwise, I think we risk just restarting what isn't working right now. It's like we have to hit a reset button. We also need to add another person, another pastor to our team, and we need time to onboard that pastor with our culture and systems. And so there'll be a period of time where that pastor will be in a residency. And there's really only one effective time to relaunch something new in Michigan. Now, if you live down in Florida where you don't have the winter and -3 degrees on January morning, you can maybe relaunch something new in January, but in Michigan you can't. Really, the only time you can launch something new is in the fall. And for several years, I was the chair of the new church team, helping plant churches in the Michigan area. And so I got a front row seat of watching churches that tried to launch at other times beside the fall, and it never worked. So when you think about that, this fall is too early to do that. So the fall of 2023 is the first chance that we have to relaunch something new, to make all the rest of these things happen. There'll be a period of learning our culture and our systems. A new person added, appointed, or hired to our team, a new pastor. And we're in the process. Dirk is working with us with a cabinet. We're actually talking with the cabinet right now, preparing for the potential of this. So the bishop is familiar with this, our district superintendent, and Dirk sits on the appointive cabinet. So he's right in the mix, knows Sycamore Creek, knows this context, and is advocating for what we need here. There would be a new appointment on July 1st of 2022. At least that's what we're looking at. Assuming that we use the appointment system. If the appointment system doesn't work in the next couple of months or so, we are prepared to hire a recruiter to do a nationwide search, in which case the appointment or the starting of somebody new might not be on July 1st. Pastor John, who's done a great job here, is being reappointed to another church on July 1st. I understand that's whether this adoption happens or not. Am I correct on that? So this new pastor then learns the culture and the systems through a residency. A residency is a period of time where someone gets to learn but doesn't have to be in charge of anything. And so that's a really important part of pulling somebody onto the team. One thing that was a little different when we did the Potterville adoption is that Mark was already, Mark actually has been at Sycamore Creek longer than I have. I'm the pastor for 13 years, but Mark, when I came on, Mark was already a lay person who was on the preaching team. So he knew Sycamore Creek's culture through and through, and he was just ready to go with our Potterville and to bring the culture of Sycamore Creek to that campus. But we don't have anybody that's obvious like that right now. We'll also then begin recruiting a launch team between Asbury and Sycamore Creek to relaunch this as a new campus. That will include meeting regularly for training, canvassing, networking, community building, support, prayer, and so on. And then a grand opening as Sycamore Creek in the fall of 2023. And that time frame lets us do two things really well. It lets us do that residency. And it also, nobody has a crystal ball right now, right, to see what's going to happen with COVID. I sure would like to try to launch something new with another year and a half past. Hopefully we're not into the 20th surge or the 30th or whatever, but I would hope by the fall of 2023 that we would have learned how to live with this and maybe gotten some herd immunity and whatever it is that we need to do to connect with people. So there would be a charge conference vote on a plan of merger sometime early-ish this year, I think, or at least that's roughly the timeline right now. I'm not sure exactly how long it's going to take to get everybody comfortable and ready to do that, but that's what we're aiming for. If you flip it over, this is one of the big questions as we've talked with your leadership team. What happens during this period of closure, and will we lose people through this time period? Let me say that there's nothing that we want to. We don't want to actively do anything to lose people or disconnect from people. And there is no way that we're not going to lose some people through this process. That'll happen. That happens like on any appointment, right? Like whenever there's a new pastor appointed, there's a shuffling of the deck in United Methodist churches, and that'll be true, I think, here as well. So we really want to be focused on connecting with new people. That's not to say that we're going to try to push people away or not focus on meeting people's needs who are already here, but our primary focus has got to be on the mission field that's outside and connecting with them. So here's kind of on paper what that season of closure will look like and what it'll be. It's really like a season of getting ready to relaunch something new. You heard me in that video talk about my first real paying job was Fazoli's. What I didn't explain very well there is that we were opening a brand new Fazoli's. So I got to be part of the team that launched a Fazoli's, which is really cool to be part of something like that. And there's a very clear process that a franchise goes through or a business goes through to launch something new. And you have a period where you have to build the building, and then you have a period where you have to hire people and build a team and train them, and then you have trainings that you do that are private, where like you're cooking the food for each other, and then you have a friends and family night. I remember that, where I got to invite all my friends and family to come to Fazoli's and eat as much as they wanted for free to test our systems and see how bad they were, so that we knew what we had to do when we had the grand opening, which was, I don't know, several weeks later. And there's a process that a church goes through like that to relaunch or to launch something new. And we've done that several times with launching a church in a diner, church in a pub, and so on. So in July, we will, by the way, you may hear me cough just a little bit. I had COVID back during the holiday seasons, and I have a lingering cough from it. But my doctor says I'm not contagious. I'm in that super immunity phase. I get 90 days where I can party because I've been vaccinated, boosted, and I've had COVID. So in July, right now we are planning on, each July during COVID, the season of COVID, we've done a series where we've given our teams a rest, and we've gone back and forth between our Potterville campus leading worship and our South Lansing campus leading worship. And this year, we're looking at doing that in one place at Woldemar Nature Center. They have a big, beautiful barn there that a lot of people get married in. And we will have worship every week there. And the first week, South Lansing will lead it. And the second week, Potterville will lead it. And the third week, South Lansing. And the fourth week, Potterville. And that gives our teams a week off. This has been really a tough season on our teams. And so it's kind of like all our campuses into one place. And Asbury would come in and be a part of that right off the bat, just as Asbury United Methodist Church, and not quite yet Sycamore Creek's campus. And then on July 31st, that's the fifth Sunday in July, we would have a final kind of memorial remembering service here. And it would be in this building, and this would be the last service that Asbury was Asbury. And we would invite back previous pastors. We would tell stories. We would celebrate that Sycamore Creek isn't bringing God to Asbury. God has already always been here. God has already been at work, and we're going to celebrate that. And then we're going to look, after that is basically like a service of birth, right? So then we're going to celebrate the new birth of this new thing. But that would be the last final memorial service for Asbury UMC. The sign would be covered, and if we get all of our finances in order, we'll start to remodel this space at that point. In August, the folks from Asbury would begin attending a Sycamore Creek campus, either Potterville or South Lansing. In some ways, you can think of this as this is like a classic merger where many United Methodist churches have gotten to a point where they've merged with a larger United Methodist church and they just get absorbed into that church. The difference is here is that that absorption into the church or that merger into the church is to prepare for a season of birth of relaunching something. And that's the energy that a merger doesn't have, that an adoption does. In September is when we have our small groups sign up. That's what we call Group Link. And there would be a chance for Asbury to have its own small group or the small groups that are here to continue, but probably not meeting in this building. Through October and December then, again, Asbury is attending Sycamore Creek to learn the culture, and we are on-ramping a new pastor. In January, we would begin to start to pull together this launch team. And again, the launch team would be people from Asbury who wanted to be part of this something new, and people from Sycamore Creek. It's going to take an infusion of some new people from Sycamore Creek, from my experience and observation so far, and from talking with the leadership team here. So in February, we would probably bring in our coach. That's not actually, we have another coach. Dirk is our coach for this adoption, but Mark and I do work with a guy named Jim Griffith. And Jim, his specialty and wheelhouse is actually launching new churches and training and coaching pastors and launching new churches. And he does training for the denomination about how to launch a new church. So in February, we would fly him in and we would have a training session for what are the practices and behaviors we need to do to launch this as a new church. And so that would happen in February. He lives in Florida. I talked to him about this. He's not happy about coming up in February. But it's cheaper to fly him up in February than to fly all of us down to Florida in February. But if anybody wants to fund that, Jim would be happy to host us in Florida to do that training. In March, our launch team begins meeting for canvassing, networking, building community. And this is not necessarily at the church, and it's not necessarily on Sunday mornings. Canvassing, networking, we're going to be out canvassing in the neighborhood. We're going to be networking in the neighborhood. We have to build new relationships. And we also are building some community amongst ourselves. So we might be meeting in like one of the community rooms across the street at Eastwood. Where's that? Is that Eastwood over there? One of the restaurants, I know different ones have like back rooms, or maybe we were meeting at Grossbeck in the clubhouse there. I haven't been in there to see whether there's a community room, but we're looking for those community room spaces where we're out in the community. Now, remember, like our video of us, we're in Potter Park Pavilion, the Tiger Den. Not the actual Tiger Den where the tigers are, it's the pavilion that's called the Tiger Den. So we're starting to do that in March. We would hold then on Easter a community Easter worship service, probably like a sunrise service, and it would be in the community. So again, out in the community, whether it's maybe the park in Grossbeck or I mean, one place that we've done services at is the Harrison Roadhouse Pub. They have that little pub in the back. I don't know that that's where we do Easter, but I'm just saying there are places in the community where we would hold these things. We've got to get out of the building. Out of the building. That's like a key piece of launching something new, building your relationships. So starting from that point on, May, June, July, August, and September, we would each month have one public preview service. This is sort of like the Friends and Family Night at Fazoli's, where you're inviting as many people as you can to come and test our systems and give us their feedback on what they think about what we're doing. It's one of the easiest invites, because all of your non-Christian friends and neighbors who don't have a church would love to come and tell you exactly what your church is not doing well. And you're inviting them to do that. And so we're holding one public preview service. And then on the other 3 weeks, we're back to canvassing, networking, community meetings. And we're also holding some comeback social or splash events where we're bringing, we've been working with Willie's Barbecue and Derek, who owns that. And we have him and bring a smoker. And we sit in the Groesbeck Park. And we hand out free ribs and free smoked chicken wings. And last time he was with us, he smoked sirloin steak, which was absolutely spectacular. People come out for free food like that. So that's an opportunity for us to build relationships, to become known in the community. So we're doing those things May, June, July, August, September. And then October 1st, that's the first Sunday in October of 2023, is our public weekly launch. If everything goes in place, this would be remodeled. This space will look very different than it does right now, both in here and out well, as much as we have funds to be able to do that with. If you go to our South Lansing campus and look at it, and then you go to our Potterville campus, you'll see that they look different, but they also look the same. There's a connection point between those. There's a culture that is carried through the architecture, the colors, the branding, and so on. All right. You all so diligently sat there and listened to me talk. Let's see, how are we doing on time? Oh, hey, we're 5 minutes ahead of... Oh, wait, no, we're not. We're 10 minutes behind. Man, who gave the preacher the microphone? All right. I want you to feel, you saw the amazing thing that was happening with New Life, but we want to show you a video. It's not nearly as awesome as New Life, but we're still pretty proud of it, that highlights our adoption at Potterville. And then I want to take a minute to interview Kathy and Mark about the changes that had to take place at Potterville. All right, so Randy, let's go ahead and roll that next video.
When I first started at Potterville, I started in September of 2016. Potterville was struggling. They were having a hard time. There were a lot of different directions the church was being pulled in.
Our congregation was going down, and so our finances wasn't that good.
We didn't want to be a dying church. We struggled with trying to reach people for Christ, and we weren't exactly sure what we needed to do.
We reached out to the district for help. We needed a change.
It took us 3 months before we heard back from the conference that we had some options. The best one, obviously, was to merge with Sycamore Creek and be adopted.
It's incredibly difficult to be adopted. And so my role has been to come into Potterville and to be the campus pastor. And the first thing I had to do was prepare the church for adoption. And when you're adopted as a church, you give up your name.
The thought of changing the name of the church was difficult. I think that people were concerned that Potterville would be lost in the process.
The first big hurdle that we had to go through was getting people ready for the adoption.
The challenges that we faced were being really clear about expectations, being clear about what changes were going to take place, making sure that there was that kind of negotiation up front. The best thing that we did in that process was we hired somebody who is a consultant who works with adoptions across the whole nation. And so he's done this in hundreds of churches. His wisdom in the situation was invaluable.
Having an expert on the outside work us through the process was a benefit because I had somebody that I could talk to if I had concerns.
One of the leaders here at Potterville said that what he was surprised by was not just how many changes that Potterville United Methodist had to make, but how many changes Sycamore Creek had to make to do this adoption.
I would tell a church concerning an adoption that this is a really viable way to grow your church. In order to do that, you need to be willing to change. And that's the tough decision before a church that's considering an adoption. Are you willing to change? Are you so committed and passionate about following Jesus and sharing his love with others that you yourself would change? Are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to give up your way of doing things so that you can reach new people with the love of Jesus?
Ask all the questions you can, because if you're the church that's being adopted, you want to get all your questions answered. You want to have everything out on the table so that There are no hidden skeletons in the closet.
Get the answers you need. Feel free to ask the questions and trust God that if it feels right, it's right.
We're seeing new people showing up. We're seeing folks come back who haven't been here in a long time. There's people resources, talent resources, there's idea resources. We're able to do more together. It's that classic, you put two horses together and they're able to do more than just the sum of the two by themselves. And we've seen that over and over again.
I'm a numbers guy. And so in terms of success, I can tout some numbers of what we've had. Prior to Sycamore Creek starting in Potterville, our average Sunday attendance was right around 50 to 60 people on Sunday mornings. Now we're averaging around 90 people on Sunday mornings. And so what we've seen is an excitement and an enthusiasm regarding our worship services that has drawn people in. One of the things to celebrate in the midst of the adoption is the life that we have, the excitement that has been generated.
All right, so besides the fact that Mark and I both have a lot more gray hair from when, what was the year that we adopted Potterville?
2016.
2016, yeah. Kathy, what are some of the, Kathy's part of our vision team. Kathy was the lay leader at Potterville. We don't really have a lay leader in our system, but she was the lay leader at Potterville. She's on our teaching team. She was a huge gift to us. Teacher, encourager, just all around cheerleader. What are some of the big changes that you saw happen at Potterville?
Well, there were quite a few changes. One of the biggest ones for me that I remember being a big change was what we talked about a little earlier with the decision making and turning that over. But it was such a relief because Potterville had been struggling, and one of the big struggles was getting people in those key roles. And as a lay leader, I was involved in all the committees. The worship, the trustees. All those different committees, and it was such a daunting task to get anything done. You had to wait month to month to month, and be able to turn that over and have a vision team come in and just, okay, we're going to do this. It was a relief, really.
We have a pretty lean decision-making process, so things happen quickly. Yeah. Talk a little bit about the building, because it doesn't really show up in that video. In fact, both those. But talk about the changes.
Yeah,
to the building.
I was thinking when you're talking, I wish we had that picture. Maybe you can pull it up that you posted of you and Mark in the cafe. We went through some big changes, and the sanctuary itself did not change really a whole lot in Potterville. We haven't done a whole lot in there yet.
Yeah,
we've done a few things, but the big change was outside of the sanctuary in Potterville. We had office spaces that we had boxed off in years past and made into office space. We had a library, and that got gutted right out down to the bare boards and the roof to the original wood floor, and polished all up, shined up, and brought in the Sycamore Creek colors. And our stained glass windows, which had been hidden behind all this office space, just popped. They came out, and it's such a beautiful space now. That's our cafe area just outside the sanctuary. We put in a new nursery, brand new nursery, which made a whole lot of sense. The office had been right up there behind the sanctuary. Now it's down in the main entrance where people come in by the fellowship hall, where the nursery had been. Brought the nursery up where the sanctuary was. We made some changes down in the fellowship hall. Brought in the Sycamore Creek's got their own color scheme, and so we tie into like the Lansing campus. But it's been a beautiful change in Potterville.
Talk about the changes you've seen in people.
Well, initially, there were some, just like this little video we saw, I was telling the folks in the back, a lot of what they talked about reminded me of Potterville. There were people that had some reservations and were a little unsure. One of the things I remember first, and one of the first meetings, I think the first meeting where I met both of you, pastors and your wives, one of our older members brought up the question of, we're going to have to change the name, are we going to take our sign down? We don't want to lose our identity as Potterville. We've been in Potterville for 125, 130 years at that point. And, Well, at that time, I was like, oh, so, yeah, because we celebrated 135 before. So a long time, anyway. We've been there a long time, like you guys. But one of the gentlemen brought up in that meeting and asked Pastor Tom, we don't want to lose our identity as part of it. And I told Tom this before. I thought he had a brilliant answer. He said, so smart, so quick on his feet. And he said, you know, the sign, your name will change. It's going to be Sycamore Creek, but our identity is in Jesus Christ. You know, what are you going to say to that? You're not going to be able to have any good comeback to that. So that, you know what? Yeah, our identity is not in being Potterville, not in being in Asbury. It's in being, you know, a member of the body of Christ. And so that was a great comeback. People got on board real quick. There was only really one older gentleman that you probably will talk about when we do our vote that I think voted down the thing. We had a 98% vote in Potterville and 100% in Lansing when we took the vote on whether or not to do it. So everybody was really on board because we just were tired and needed a change. You saw me in the video say we needed a change. You know, I reached out, and so people knew we had to do something different. If not, we were just going to slowly ebb away in Potterville. So it didn't take long for people to get on board.
Talk about the change of energy.
Oh, yeah, the energy, not just in the church, but in the community for the church, because Potterville is the hub. The United Methodist Church in Potterville is the hub of the community. It always has been. And so even people that don't attend church there or weren't members there consider it their church. You know, they were married there, they had their grandma's funeral there, whatever. So it was their church, whether they're part of the church. And so the energy in the church just skyrocketed with the adoption, but in the community too, people noticed the change. They noticed what was going on and the new life in the church.
Mark, would you talk a little bit about the changes from the perspective? Kathy's also in the super immunity phase here. 90 days, we can go party. You want to be in the COVID ward at Sparrow? If we wanted to. Mark, you talk about the changes from the perspective of leading as a pastor. What was that like, leading those changes? Realizing I should have given you guys these questions ahead of time, but you're good thinking on your feet.
Yeah, we can make that work. So on the ground as the pastor of an adoption, you are straddling the honoring of history and helping people to remember and celebrate all the things that have happened in that building, while letting go of some control and letting go of some of the tradition of the church and being open to accepting new things. And it doesn't mean that the adopting church comes in and just says, this is everything that has to happen. We know exactly what's going to happen. That's not the way it works. There are gifts that the adopted church brings. And it's the hard role of the pastor who's leading the adoption to recognize those gifts, see where God is at work, and continue to join God in that work. And then also to see where things aren't working and to identify those things and to let go of some things. And that was a very difficult process as part of the adoption process, sifting through that with people and coming to conclusions together. Again, this isn't just Sycamore Creek saying, we know everything about everything. No, we don't. We work together on this. And hearing people's stories, hearing the traditions, and recognizing which things could continue and bear fruit and which things we needed to let go. And yeah, that was tough.
Talk just a little bit. This is the last question, and we'll start to give people a chance to ask some questions. But going through COVID the last 2 years, what's it been like to be part of a multi-site versus what would it have been like, do you think, if you were by yourself?
Do you want me to answer that first? Oh man, it's so much better being a part of a multi-site. To be able to have ministry partners, both at the church layperson level and then also at the leadership level, to be able to go through difficult things with Tom, it makes all the difference in the world. Being a pastor is really hard right now. Being a church reaching new people is really hard right now. And there are so many ways that through being part of a multi-site, we're better together. We're better able to discern together. We're better able to listen together. We're better able to follow where God is leading together. And to try to navigate that on your own is it's really hard. I mean, like Kathy said, when the leadership team handed over the keys, so to speak, of the Potterville campus, there's like a relief in that to share the load together. And navigating through the pandemic over the past 2 years, I can't imagine doing it on my own without being a part of Sycamore Creek and the wonderful systems that we have, and to be able to do it with Tom.
And that's true from this side as well. I mean, I think I would echo everything you just said. We are really better together. All right, we want to. I'm gonna just leave you, the two of you, up here, okay, during this Q&A time. But I'm gonna have you just for a moment turn to a person next to you and say, what's something you've noticed tonight about what we presented, and maybe what's a question you have left about what this means for Asbury or for Sycamore Creek. But again, we're focusing really on the Asbury folks tonight, okay? So I'm gonna give you just a couple minutes to turn to somebody. What's something you've noticed tonight? And what's a question you have that you'd like answered? Go ahead. All right, we're going to try this again where you all have the chance to talk out loud. Again, I want to emphasize this is a chance for Asbury folks. And we'll try to repeat what you've said so you can hear each other and the people online can hear it. So who's the extrovert who wants to go first? Say something they've noticed and a question they may have. Carol, all right. She's not an extrovert, but she is going first. All right. That's our process, is we give introverts the chance to practice talking about it first before they have to say it to everyone else. So, Carol, what you got?
One of the questions that I haven't seen addressed is how do you, during this dark time, how do you deal with the needs, like people who are sick or the funerals?
Carol's asking, how do we address the pastoral care needs during that? You mentioned dark time, pause, closure. So I'm not quite sure what to call it, but I want to have Tom Fox stand up, Pastor Tom Fox. Tom is our care pastor, and he is the one who is our first responder to all of those sorts of things. This is maybe a little bit different if you're used to the person that you see on the stage doing most of the pastoral care. In our culture and system, Tom handles the first responder. So if one of you's in the hospital, Tom's going to be the first one to visit you. Whether it goes past that or not, as far as him, that he kind of he evaluates that, does triage, so to speak. So that would be the same thing. Tom does most of the funerals. If there's people getting married, that's a little bit of a toss-up. We all look at kind of where we're at and so on. But shut-ins would also be Tom. And we're also working on building. We have some people as well who do some of those things for us. Shelly Mole, if you would stand up. Shelly's part of our care team. And she does a little bit of that ministry as well. But she's only recently retired, so now she has all of that free time to, yeah. Did that answer your question? Thanks for it. It's a great question, Carol. How about others? What's either something you noticed tonight or a question you have yet unanswered? I see Bruce.
One thing I mentioned to our small group here is, of course, each situation is different. You talked about the Potterville Church as sort of being the center of the community, where our church is certainly not the center of the community. In fact, we got a much larger congregation right next door to us, so in different denominations. There are different challenges that are faced in that kind of a situation. How would we go about addressing those kinds of things?
Yeah, so this is something that's been a little interesting because I've heard some of your leaders mention that. And I guess I don't know the experience completely on the ground, but when John was first appointed here, we went together out to have coffee, and I said, John, Asbury United Methodist Church has the best location in all of Lansing. It's the one truly regional location. People from, I would guess, from Alma, St. John's, Alma. Do Ithaca folks come down to Eastwood to shop? I'm not quite sure how far north it goes. I'm guessing Leslie. I doubt like people in Jackson probably don't drive this far, but you've got East Lansing, DeWitt. I would guess people from Grand Ledge drive over here to shop. Holt. I know people from Holt drive because I live in Holt and I drive up here. So I do think that, I mean, one of the beauties of, to me at least, when I look at this campus is it does have a neighborhood, Groesbeck, that you can focus on. And no church can be regional and only regional without adopting a community to bless. And whether that's Groesbeck or the communities that are a little further west of here, I'm not, there are neighborhoods right here, but it's also regional. And that's something that we'll get the chance to experiment on, how to really have a regional reach at this campus. You don't ever have to explain where Eastwood is at, across from Eastwood Town Center. Like I have to explain, where's South Lansing at? Well, my quickest thing I've learned to say is that we're down the street from Potter Park Zoo. Mark doesn't ever have to say where they're at. We're Sycamore Creek in Potterville. Oh yeah, you guys are like the center of everything there.
We're the mega church in Potterville.
Yeah. They are the mega church, and that's absolutely true. Did that answer your question, Bruce? I mean, I don't have the full answer yet, but I'm personally excited about the potential of this location. I think I saw Dawn, did I see you like?
I thought, well, should I ask this or not? So we're in a period of discernment.
Yes.
And then I see way at the bottom, there's a vote. But where is the point where Sycamore Creek makes a decision that, yes, we're going to go forward with this?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I think, so there's been two kind of obstacles or challenges that we've had to figure out. One is I haven't had a Mark Opperly right in the wings. Mark was a breast cancer researcher. He's really technically the Reverend Dr. Opperly. He's got way more education than I do. So if you want to talk about breast cancer, Mark is your guy. Yeah, he ran the lab at MSU. I don't have Mark Opperly, so we've had to figure out. We're working on the leadership thing, and we're not ready to be public about the work that we've done on that. But I can tell you I'm really excited about the potential that exists behind the scenes with what we're working on. And we've been working really closely with Dirk. I've been in conversation with the bishop, with our DS, and we're working that avenue first. And if that avenue doesn't pan out in the next month or two, then we're ready to hire a recruiter to figure out somebody nationwide, either in the United Methodist or perhaps outside of United Methodism. And we've talked to the bishop and the DS about that. And they've given us their blessing that if the appointment system doesn't work out, they're fine with us moving that route. That was the number one thing. That was the first obstacle. The second obstacle is having a financial model to make this work. We're not a mega church. And in a lot of cases, like what you saw with New Hope, they do have a mega church that has like the funds to pull on a full-time pastor right off the bat. And we don't have that. So there's going to have to be some financial partnerships to make this work. One of the financial partnerships is the people who are already here, who are giving, being excited and committed enough to continue giving, and holding on to enough of that remnant. Because, like I said, we're not going to try to push anybody out, but there's no way that we're going to keep everybody. That's just unrealistic expectation. The second partner is Sycamore Creek, and Lord bless you and everybody. Like, we've had a banner several years during COVID. It's been the weirdest thing. Our giving has been stronger than it really has ever been. Our church has seriously stepped up in some amazing ways. And we also have we've done capital campaigns at our church, and we tithe 10% of that for our next venue. So we have a little bit in the bank of fund for our next venue. A third partner, I think, is the Asbury Foundation. And I met with Bruce last night. Bruce and Chuck and I had a great conversation. I loved Bruce's spirit and heart for that money and helping us guide it. There's some things I think we're going to have to work on rewriting the bylaws for it. And there's some stuff we're going to have to do with that. But this church has resources in that foundation. And I think one of the courageous things that you all are doing is considering this adoption and the changes that it will take rather than just spending that down to zero and then closing. Because a lot of churches decide to do that. We have an endowment, let's just keep drawing on it till it doesn't exist anymore. We'll put off the decision till we can't afford to keep the doors open. But the other two partners are the conference and the district. And we're in conversation with both of those about grants. And I think that those are gonna so that's 5 financial partners. And I think especially after the conversation with Bruce last night, I came home, I went to sleep with a feeling that, and actually I had a conversation with the conference yesterday too, that there's enough of a partnership there. So we're super close, I think, to Sycamore Creek saying, when those two things come together or they're really close, I think we'll be ready to say, yes, we're ready to do this. But if we can't figure out those two things, then as much as we might want to do it, we won't be able to do it. But I'm very optimistic about both of those at this point. Our whole team is. Great question. Thank you for asking it. Anybody else? A thing that you noticed or want to highlight, or a question you have? Yeah. Help me with your name again. I know Eric. That's it. Thank you, Eric. Go green.
Go white.
I am a Blue Devil pastor.
That was just an amazing moment right there. The Holy Spirit was at work.
I saw the Michigan State.
Wow.
I went for it.
Was the emphasis on the blue or the devil?
Both. You will have to get used to Blue Devil jokes.
But Mark is all.
I am all MSU.
All right. Eric, what do you got?
As far as Asbury goes, we've kind of done this before. Like years, long before me, but it used to be Michigan Avenue Church, and then I don't know what the reasoning was, but they moved out here and built this. I don't know if it's because Groesbeck was being built or what, but we changed our name and restarted back then, if I'm understanding it right. So, it's not as scary as you might think it is.
Yeah, and I'll actually go back even further. So I was talking with Bruce. I said, Bruce, did you grow up United Methodist? He said, no, I grew up United Brethren, which then merged with the Evangelical Association to become the Evangelical United Brethren, which then merged with the Methodist Church to become the United Methodist Church. So Bruce has been adopted into 3 different denominations over his lifetime, and now possibly then, another church inside that denomination. So this is not anything new. It's a way that we do vibrancy. Yeah. That's a great observation, Eric. Thanks for mentioning it. Sarah?
We had some questions back here about the use of this space, even when worship isn't happening here for that time, for funerals and that sort of thing, not just pastoral care stuff, but the use of this space.
Yeah, so I think that it will be the exception to the rule that this building is used for anything during that time that's closed. Those things like funerals and so on would happen at one of our other buildings. Part of that will be, if this all works, this place will be a mess. it'll be being remodeled, and that's part of the process. So that it just won't even be available. But we have two buildings, and actually, in some ways, remember that the church is not a building, and so if we want it in the neighborhood, then what are the resources in this neighborhood where we could do those things out in the neighborhood? So again, just we've got to always be thinking like outside. The church is not a building. It never was. So that's why when we launch church in a pub, church in a diner, it's not pub church or diner church. It's the church that meets in a pub, which is really just an old like Methodist circuit, right? Like the Methodist circuit rider would go to the Methodist society. That's what I felt like. I go to the Methodist society that meets in the church building on Sunday morning, the church in a church. And then I'd go preach at the Methodist society that meets in the pub in the back room of Buddy's on Monday nights, and I'd preach there. And then I'd ride to the Methodist society that meets in the diner on Tuesday nights and preach there. And then the next week I'd ride over to Potterville and preach at the Methodist society at Potterville. Like it's the church is the people. So say that. We need to go to them. Yeah. All right. I'm sure there are more questions, but I'm just cognizant of the time. I up front, we weren't going to answer every single question. There may be as well. I recognize, like, if I'm the most talkative introvert you'll ever meet, Mark is the quietest extrovert you will ever meet. And I know that if I was in your shoes, I might have a really burning question, but my temperament wouldn't want to ask it. So you might want to come up privately afterwards and ask me or Mark or Kathy, or you may still need time to process it. You want to drop me an email, or wait for a future meeting. So some next steps. I think Debbie actually, Dawn. I'm sorry, Debbie, Dawn. Dawn, you kind of helped highlight some of those next steps. We're working on, in the appointment system, potentially we're working on grants. I think probably your leadership team will need some time to reflect on this meeting, and they may decide to pull you all back together when we're not in the room so that you can feel comfortable talking without us in the room. And we're going to also be holding another town hall meeting with Sycamore Creek to talk about some of these things, as well as just other stuff that we need to talk about. And I'm going to continue shepherding, working with Dirk to shepherd the leadership and the financial side of this. Bruce has gotten us the foundation bylaws. Chuck is working on becoming the expert on those so that we can navigate that. And those are all some of the next steps. Dirk, are there any next steps that I'm missing that you want to highlight?
Prayer.
Thank you. Prayer, that's yes, please.
I think prayer is the foundation of it all. And what does God want to happen in this church, in this community, and in relationship to Sycamore Creek? So laying that foundation of prayer is really.
So Dirk said praying for what does God want, what does God want for this church, for this community, so on. I made a commitment, by the way, myself to be prayerful in this community and to kind of regularly drive through it prayerfully. So if you drive by the church and you see my car sitting in the parking lot and me sitting there, it's because I'm sitting there praying. Or John, if you see me driving by the parsonage, I'm not stalking you. I'm praying through the neighborhood. So that's something that I made a commitment to do. We want to, again, at the end of every meeting, we like to just say what went well in the meeting, and we like to celebrate first. So turn to somebody next to you and just say one thing that went well tonight. If you're if you're on Zoom or Facebook, type in the comments section one thing that you think went well tonight.
And you'd be able to do it in person too.
It's nice to have both options. You know, so people can't get out, but yeah, I really like being in person. That was one of my favorite parts. Nice.
So Mark Raymond on Zoom says, feels like a good spirit in the room. He's not even in the room, he's on Zoom. Jeremy says, I appreciate Randy's ability to make this look and sound amazing. It feels as if I'm there in person. Give it up for Randy Flick, our video guy. Thank you, God, for Randy. What's something that went well tonight? Just shout it out. Good turnout. Yeah, from both churches, I feel like, especially in COVID. There's more people than we've had on a Sunday morning in our building.
Same here. Getting to know some of the people.
Getting to know some people from Sycamore Creek went well.
Yeah.
Questions and conversation. Videos were nice.
I appreciated what I felt like was transparency on your part.
Feeling like there's a transparency on our part.
You're authentic.
Authentic.
I'll slip you that 20 later, Don. Thanks.
All right. Maybe there was something that would have improved tonight, or that was missing or confusing. So take just a second and talk to the person next to you. If there's something, there doesn't have to be. You can keep celebrating, but something that would have made tonight better. All right. Jeremy Cracky says that it would have been better if we got a personalized video from Bishop Bard. Come on, you guys. What is that bishop doing? Probably slacking. He's probably sitting in his pajamas, binge watching something on Netflix tonight. Anything that you want to share that would have made tonight better? Besides, I heard donuts from John.
It wasn't a reflection on tonight, but it was a discussion around in things like these, when there's a merger, it is impossible to over-communicate.
Yeah.
So it's really just keeping that level of communication as high as possible.
Yeah. Chuck says in their conversation, it's impossible to over-communicate. So more communication is always welcome. Not necessarily a reflection of tonight, but just we're going to do our best to do that. Thanks for remembering that, Chuck. Oh, okay. What could have made it better, Micah?
I think maybe more information about the voting process and something like that. If you're
More clarity about the voting process.
even though you might not like know about all that kind of stuff, how it all works, but maybe a little more.
He's the future Robert's Rules of Order, the parliamentarian in the back there. So some more clarity on the voting. Yeah. Thank you, Micah. That was a good point.
He did.
He did. He just didn't.
I immediately said snacks.
Snacks.
I love snacks.
All right. Well, like I said, we continue to learn. We're only about 12 minutes past when I said we were going to be done here, so that's not too bad, given this is the first time we've met together. So we'll be here for a little while if you want to come up and chat. But otherwise, let's take a moment and pray. And I want to invite you to look around the room, and we're made in the image of God. So when you look around the room, you're looking at icons of God. And just take a moment and meditate on the image of God that's across from you, especially if you're from Sycamore Creek, somebody from Potter or from Asbury. I feel like this is going to be like a parent who keeps calling their kids the wrong names. And meditate on the image of God and pray for that person. from Sycamore Creek or from Potterville. Just silently lift them up to the Lord. And then pick one other person. This is one of my favorite prayers from the Book of Common Prayer. I think it's appropriate for a little bit of the fog that we feel like we're in right now. This is another day, O Lord. I know not what it will bring forth, but make me ready, Lord, for whatever it may be. If I am to stand up, help me to stand bravely. If I am to sit still, help me to sit quietly. If I am to lie low, help me to do it patiently. And if I am to do nothing, let me do it gallantly. Make these words more than words, and give me the Spirit of Jesus. And all who agreed said, Amen. Amen. Friends, thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you if you were on Facebook or YouTube or Zoom. Peace out.